It likes me like right now, and we are live. Good morning, everybody. Today is Thursday. I believe it's March 3rd, 2016. I am joined today by a very special guest, Tanya Losada Brennan. It has been many years since I have seen you, but I am very excited about this podcast, and we're going to have a great conversation today. Tanya, where are you joining us from?
I'm joining you from Chesapeake, Virginia, sunny Chesapeake, Virginia.
Very nice. Not in the cold where we once knew each other. A little bit of background about Tanya. She was married to my father from the time that what was the age that you met me?
Wow. You were 4 or 5. I started dating your father when I was 16. So that was in in 86.
86. Okay. I
1986.
was
In
3 years old.
86. Yeah. I think I
Wow.
met you around when you were 4. Because it
4.
was about a year after I started dating him that I met you.
Okay.
We went out on activities, and me and him got
Right.
married in 1990,
Wow.
from 90 to 95.
Very cool. Very cool. So that was, yeah, I was 3 years old, and that was a long, long time ago. One of the things that sticks out a lot about our time together is the thing that you taught me. I don't remember how old I was, but it was my very educated mother just showed me 9 planets, and I remember that still to this day,
Yes,
like it's the
yes.
back of my hand. It was the first mnemonic that I think I ever realized I knew, um, and that was it was something that I've used on a couple people to help them out, and it's been a lot of fun to remember that. You were a teacher back then, weren't you?
I was. I worked in the school system, and it was kind of funny because you were actually, I always saw you like as my first son. And I
Okay.
remember as I got older and in my new experiences, I adopted a son.
Right.
And I remember speaking to you about him, and he would always say, "Well, who is this Jeff that you constantly talk about? Who is this little Jeff?" And I was like, "Well, little Jeff was my first son." And he was like, "Well, no, I'm your first son." And I said, "No, well, actually, there was always little Jeff before you."
Yeah.
But I learned from little Jeff, and now we could go forward.
Yeah, yeah. There's a lot of stuff that was going on back then. I mean, obviously I was only 3 or 4. You were 17, 18 at that time. It was, that was
Yeah, I
transitionary
was.
period for everyone. That's
It
the thing that
was.
never stops. So that was cool. The other thing that always sticks out to me, and it's a topic that happens a lot recently, especially with the stats going through the roof the way they do, is diabetes. That was something that you suffered from, and I would assume only because I haven't heard any latest breakthroughs, you still suffer from.
Definitely.
And what is it? There's different types, and some people are confused about a lot of them. Which one is it that you have, if you don't
I
mind
have
clarifying?
type 1 diabetes. Type 1 diabetes is childhood. It used to be called juvenile onset diabetes, and that's for people who get it as children and they have no pancreatic usage at all. So my pancreas does not create any insulin whatsoever. Then there's type 2 diabetes. Now that's for
Mhm.
people who are older, and it's also named adult onset.
Okay.
So you get it as an adult, typically sometimes from your eating habits, weight gain, and it also has to do with if your parents have it. You know, if it's in your genes, you
Right.
always have that like a red flag in your life.
Sure. Yeah, you've always got to take extra precautions so you
Yes.
don't tip the scales. Right. Yeah, there's a lot of misconceptions there and it was one of the things that I saw a lot in the Air Force was, and it was something that I noticed with you even back then, was that you were not, when you see people, you have, I guess, always the first reaction, right? When you picture someone, if someone forewarned you, hey, you're going to meet this person so and so, and so and so has diabetes, be sensitive about it. oftentimes in your mind, when you visualize this person you haven't met yet, you're going to picture someone who's heavy set, and back then, and I've even known guys in the Air Force who have gotten it who are actually thin, and it has nothing to do with body configuration. It's simply, well, I guess it does in that sense because it's still your pancreas, which is inside your body, but it doesn't have anything to do with your body shape, I guess is my point. It has to do with your internal organs, which is something that obviously we don't see.
Yeah.
But that's, how has that been since then? I mean, has it become easier to, from my recollection, you were still doing insulin injections, right?
I was. Now, I had a baby 8 years ago, and when I went through the whole pregnancy stage, they actually put me on a pump, an insulin pump. And what that does is it kind of works like your pancreas.
Okay.
It's always attached to me, and I get the insulin constantly, daily, and it's helped me have better control over my diabetes.
Oh, good.
But
Yeah, that
to
was,
be honest, it
that's,
is weight gain because
yeah,
believe it or not, the insulin, it kind of makes you want to eat more.
right. Yeah,
After
there's
about
an unsatisfaction in the brain that happens then.
right, yeah, your
Yeah,
body's craving the food.
right. Yeah, and especially, I mean, it's it's targeted more towards certain areas, but there's I lost my train of thought on that one. It was encapsulating my memory was that there was a time that you were in the basement at my grandmother's house in Queens,
Mhm.
and it was my first experience with really starting to really understand what it meant to be diabetic, and the only reason I was even aware of it was that, like I said, you were doing the insulin injections, but that day, um, the turn of events would be out of order if I tried to say them, but long story short was, you know, you ended up having a diabetic incident, which led into a diabetic coma for a little while, right? Isn't that right?
Yes.
That was extremely terrifying at that time. But obviously, luckily, everything worked out okay. Um, there was a time. Uh, you're always pressed for time anytime a medical emergency happens, and my father always, I don't know if it was a joke to make me feel better or what it was, but he was like, you saved her with a starburst. It was like, how did I do that? And, he explained to me later on, the imbalance of sugar to insulin. And it was like, oh, okay. And that was my first, like, real wake up call. Like, whoa, like, that's something that's serious,
It is
and
very serious. I've gotten better, but I've gotten better to control it and to know my body. I mean, when we first met, I was a new diabetic. I became diabetic when I was 15 years old.
wow.
So I was really learning about it myself during those years. I would say it took me about a good 5 to 10 years to really know it because at that time also as a female, you got the
Mhm.
hormones. So your body's
Right.
changing. Females, you have a daughter now, so just as a
Yeah.
wake up call
It's
to you,
coming
hey,
for her too. Yep.
hormones when they start kicking in, oh, your body goes through a lot of changes.
Right.
And those changes also affect your diabetes.
Yeah, that must have been a very confusing time, especially because, like you said, you have one set of changes happening, and then now you're having to deal with this whole set of other changes. One is a natural biological, uh, cycle that happens and starts at a certain time, and then the other is, obviously was abrupt for you. For one to hit off at 15, like, whoa, wait a second, you mean I have to change the way I eat now? And I couldn't even imagine having to go through something like that at that age. I mean, I still to this day I don't really. I mean, I'm very undisciplined when it comes to my meals. I've tried to be better about it in the recent months since we moved here. We eat a lot of greasy food now since we're in Puerto Rico. Everything here is fried. It's so delicious, but it's that temptation that you're going to pay for later. It's like, oh man, my
Sure,
stomach's going to really regret this. And
sure.
I've try to make the conscious effort, not only for me, but for my daughter, for my wife, um, that we try to eat healthy as often as we can eat at home. Is that I guess that's the unwritten rule that we're kind of living by here. We eat out a lot less than we used to. I feel like just being here in Puerto Rico, period. Even though we do eat when we go to the beach and we're hanging out and stuff like that. There's food everywhere. They've there's no shortage of vendors trying to sell you good food.
Of
But
course. Of course.
it's that limitation of like, all right, listen, let's not eat out, or let's try to eat before we go to the beach. But sometimes they just get you. They get you. Those guilty pleasures. Those
Well, you
guilty
touched
pleasures.
upon it earlier, and this is where you said you lost your thought. I think what you were going towards, really, they say that diabetes affects more minorities, the Hispanics, the blacks, because of our
Yes.
food.
Right.
And I think that's the train of thought. Am I right or wrong?
Yeah, yeah. I think that's exactly where I was going. Yep. It's the
Yeah,
certain kind of foods that we're raised eating. That other cultures either don't eat it at all, or they make it a different way that has less health hazards to it. And that's that's a big cultural, not problem, it's just a difference. It's the situation at hand. We grow up eating different kinds of foods in different places.
exactly.
And
Yeah.
that's it doesn't help when you're in New York that has every flavor of every kind of food from every part of the world that you can think of. um, I guess there's a lot more variety, but it's a lot trickier when you're places like here where, yeah, you have your farmland and you get your vegetables, and there's a lot of peppers and tomatoes that go into everything here, but all the meats here, well, not all the meats, excuse me, most of the meats here are fried. Everything's in oil, lots of salt. All these things are targets, that can elevate your insulin. You know,
Not only your insulin, but also your blood pressure,
right,
the salt.
right, which comes
And
with
us
other
as
problems. Right,
Hispanics, we do like salty foods. We do like our food to
right.
be seasoned.
Yeah.
One thing I learned with your grandmother was really how to cook. And I love your grandmother so much. And I always remember how she would tell me your favorite meal. I don't know if you remember, but when you were a child, your favorite meal was the breaded chicken breast, fried,
Uh huh.
with your rice, your beans, and your salad. You
Yep.
loved the meal. Loved it.
Yeah, we used to. We had a name for it. It was carne with the crumbs, and
Yes.
translation, meat with crumbs on it. But it didn't really matter which one. I learned a lot later from my grandmother that my favorite one was the veal when I was a kid. She would
Yeah.
do veal. She would do chicken cutlets. I believe
Yeah.
she did pork also, but she varied it. And yeah, that's honestly still to this day, it's one of my favorite meals. Actually, I made it a couple weeks ago with my daughter, and I sent a
Good.
couple pictures to my dad because I thought he would get a kick out of that. That
Yeah.
trying to pass down some traditions, and she likes it also. So when I don't mess it up, she likes it.
That's
And
good. Your
yeah,
grandmother always cooked it. And even now, when I cook it, I think of you. I was like, oh, yeah, this
yeah,
was Jeff's favorite meal.
yeah. It's just it's one of those memory things. It's like, oh yeah, that's the pleasure food right there, right in the
Yeah.
back. And my cousins and I always talked about it. We still do when we see each other, Sherry and Vivi. And it's yeah, it's one of those home cooked meals that you just can't get away from.
Oh,
And
no.
not that you would want to. That made it sound terrible. That made it sound like I'm trying to get away from it. I'm running towards it really. Can't run towards it fast enough. But
And that's what memories are for. We can remember them with joy.
yeah, absolutely, absolutely.
And
That's
it's
the
good that
beauty
you're
of them.
passing it down to your daughter.
Yeah, I mean that's part of this whole experience. Also, the podcast, I was joking around and I called it digital couch time with the family.
Right.
I mean, it's especially now that we moved here to Puerto Rico back in August. I mean, it's been impossible to sit with my family and talk with them like we used to. In Miami, I was living within 10 miles from both of my sisters, my mother, and my grandmother. And then my grandfather even moved from from Colombia. I'd say maybe 3 years ago. So the entirety of what I grew up with on my mother's side of the family as a childhood, they were all within 10 minutes from each other. So needless to say, we spent a lot of family time together. And, when you spend that much time with your family, sometimes it can be frustrating, but it was really good. We had a lot of close experiences that really bonded us. And it was great for my daughter, especially because, she had both of her aunts there, both of her grandmothers, two grandfathers that, and they all spoiled the hell out of her because she's a great kid, and she draws a lot of love. She's that kind of kid, and it's a lot of fun to see that. But at the same time, it's been actually, you know what? It hasn't even been difficult for her. She took the move like a champ. She misses them, and when she goes back, obviously, she spends all her time with her family, but she's been really good about the move. She really championed the change. Um, not that she had too much of a choice, but there's I was in moving situations as a kid, and we sometimes didn't make it so easy. It was we made it more of a pain in the ass than it needed to be. But she wasn't like that. She just flowed through it, and it was really good. I was really proud of her for that one.
I'm sure you and your wife were probably both
But
happy. Was it made your life easy?
yeah, a lot easier when nobody's complaining about their situation. We all came for my wife's work. Um, I left my IT position at a clinic behind, and really I don't miss it at all. I mean, it was at first it was kind of like, what's going on over there, this, that, and the third, and I was consulting with them, so they could get their new guy trained up. But it's been 8 months, or it was 8 months, and they were like, listen, this guy's got to either learn what he's doing or find another job. So we're gonna have to cut you short, and hopefully he can figure this all out by himself. And it was like, well, I mean, good luck. This guy had no intentions of learning what it was that I was doing for them. So it was kind of like, good luck with that. I
Right.
cared enough to extend my services to you guys since I was moving. It was not my idea to resign, but I'm not going to be here. So, I got to do what I got to do and go where I got to go. But,
Sure.
it was a good transition. I've liked it. My wife enjoys her job. She, things are getting better for her. She's getting more perks and more responsibilities from there. Uh, we finally, well, since we're here, we were told very much when we came that the public school here was terrible. So we ended up putting my daughter in a private school that's not too far from here. So she's really enjoying it. She's got a lot of friends. She was that new girl from the United States when she first showed up. The school that we picked for her is primary English, so she doesn't have to struggle too much with the change of language. But she's also in the Spanish classes so that she can start to really accelerate her learning there. And
That's wonderful.
yeah,
How about you? How are you at Spanish?
not bad, not bad. I've done pretty well for myself. Luckily for me, my grandmother, my grandfather both spoke fluent Spanish. That was their primary language, and the same was it was the same way on my mother's side as well. Both grandparents over there are primary Spanish. So I had a lot of Spanish influence when I was a kid. I learned how to speak Spanish little by little with my grandparents, but I ended up doing okay. My father always cracks up because he says I used to take my grandmother to the bank to translate for her, and it's really no different now. I'm involved in this project with two guys from New York, and we are starting lacrosse here in Puerto Rico. So it's been it'll continue to be a very translative role. I'll be the guy who speaks Spanish. One of the other guys does as well, but the third guy doesn't, and his wife does. But it's been a comfort. It's allowed me to maneuver where I've needed to. It's definitely always a positive thing that I can speak both languages. I think I don't think there's been a time where it's been a negative at all. So, we've been trying to push it on, not push it on her, but help her along with her transition and make sure that she gets that experience also. I spent a lot of time with my grandparents as a kid, so
You
I think it
did.
was a little easier for me to really pick up with that because it was daily conversation with them. So not that my
It's really
grandmother didn't
important.
spend a lot of time with my my daughter, but you know, it was a lot less than I did. So yeah,
Yeah,
but no,
it's really
absolutely.
important. I think us as Hispanics, we have to really push that culture onto our youth. I think it's really, really important because our culture is great. You know, it's what
Yeah.
made us who we are. So even if we're born, like I was born in the United States, my parents were both Dominican born and reared in Dominican Republic, but
Hmm.
I'm very closely tied to my roots, and I'm speaking Spanish to my children. And you know, it's a little difficult because now I don't have my mom around or my father around for
Yeah, I
them
was
to
sorry to
go
hear.
to. But yeah, thanks. It's really, really important to continue that. You know, I think it's vital for all of us as Hispanics to continue it because it's really important.
Right.
We're a very large part of this country. And we're a very important part of the country because we could have a say if we were to unite.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. You know, there's been a lot of news here about Puerto Rico lately because of all the chaos going on over there. With I don't understand it too much, but from what I'm understanding, there's a lot of passport issues with Haitians and Dominicans, and I don't understand the full extent to the chaos that's going on over there. But there's apparently a lot of Dominicans coming here to Puerto Rico. They're leaving the island in large numbers, and you know, that's something that, you know, it's as a culture, you know, you see what's going on in the Middle East with the refugees and everything like that. When we can band together as a culture, I think it could make situations like that a lot easier. Um, you know, that's not to say that we need to take everyone in and you know, house all the refugees that come towards us, but it's something that, you know, where we can help at least is not letting them feel like they're you know, abandoned out there. You know, and you know, again, I don't understand the full extent of it, but it's one of those cultural things that, you know, there's a part of our culture that's undergoing, you know, issues right now, and you know, that's, you know, is there a way to fix it? Who knows? That's It's not for us to decide.
No, it's not. It's not. But as you say, I think it's just not even a culture thing. I think it's a humanitarian thing. How are you going to not
Oh,
let people come? What are we? We have to take care of each other. Are we going to leave
right.
people just out on the on in a boat out on the in the ocean? Can't
Yeah,
do that.
yeah. It's
You know, of course, put people to work. I'm not saying not
oh no,
to.
absolutely,
And
absolutely.
yeah,
You know,
everybody should have a say, and everybody should have a valid input.
every able mind and pair of hands should be, you know, put to use. That's at minimum. You know, I think that's a very big misconception about our culture, or at least that was a lot of the jokes that I heard in the Air Force. Was that, you know, well, the first one was that either we were Mexican or Puerto Rican. There was no other kinds of Hispanics, apparently, according to some of the guys that I met. Not all of them were like that, I should clarify, but a large number of them were very closed-minded as far as, you know, and not really closed-minded because they were open to it. It was just that they were ignorant to those things, you know, at the time. And
Sure.
talking to them and through explaining, I guess, maybe filling them in with some understanding and giving them a little different perception, you know, there was a very the strongest workforce of us were Hispanics. You know, it was that's just the way it was. And I'm not putting down any of the other guys. A lot of them worked hard too. But if you did it by the numbers, you would see that were the Hispanic airmen. You know, we were always the ones out there, and we took pride in that. You know, it was one of those things that, you know, to overcome the stigma that they had of you when you showed up. Because I know I definitely went through that when I first got there. I was based out of North Carolina, and there were a couple guys that, oh, look, another one, you know, here we go, and you know, we get another lazy bones on the crew, and it was like, okay, no problem, that's how you want to see things. And you know, we worked our asses off to make sure that we changed the way they saw us, and it was a community kind of thing that we had there. And you know, one of my very good friends is a police officer now out of New York in the Bronx, and he was, you know, there with me. He was a hydraulics guy on my plane, and you know, we became very close, and that was a big part of that was a small part of the struggle, I should say, in the Air Force, was changing their minds of what kind of ethics we had as far as, the work labor that we put in.
Yeah, and that's how it is with everything. I mean, I think in the military and just in the regular job force, I think that's something that as Hispanics we have to struggle with.
Yeah.
And the only way we keep doing it is by continuing to work, which we do. We work very hard.
Yeah.
And we're not just lawn care people or what have you.
Right. We're not just Chinese cooks, it's
We're not. We're not.
it's a
We're
lot
we're
more than
professionals.
that. Yeah,
We're
absolutely.
professionals.
We're we're able to learn like every other culture. What upset me a lot about that though, and I guess the worst part of it was like, do you guys not see the lazy people in your cultures also? Like,
True.
listen, I'm the first one to say, yeah, we got some lazy Hispanics, but can you guys not also say that you guys got some lazy others? Like
True.
it's not all one-sided. But you can't change everybody's mind, and at least not with a conversation. And that's where the hard work really pays off in letting them see that different side. That the work ethic was important to us. And yeah, that's I don't know what more to say about that one.
What's
What
the
I
Air
had
Force? How was the Air Force? Tell me.
the Air Force, that was an interesting journey. Um, I went in November of 2001. I had signed all my paperwork in June, not all of it, but the initial process of the paperwork I had started in June, right after my 18th birthday. Um, right after I graduated high school, I think it was the weekend after, I went to New York to go stay with my father until I left, and I was working at Chelsea Piers there, and 9/11 happened. So it became a thing of, okay, I was already going, and now, this happened. I was in New York at the time. My father was working at the Bank of New York, which was very, very close to Ground Zero. And it was one of those terrifying things. I like a lot of people, bought into everything that they had put on the news the day after or the day of. And so I was part of the mass mob that was, all right, let's go to the desert and let's go bring war to these guys and let's go bring the pain. I had that mentality going in. My mother obviously couldn't foresee what 9/11, nobody could, that was going to happen. And so she was terrified at that point. She was like, damn, what have we done? We set in motion these wheels and now we can't undo it. But for me, it was more invigorating. For me, it was like, well, yeah, before I was kind of going with a lack of option. Now it's like, yeah, let's go. Like, look what happened. Look what they did to us. Yeah, I got to go. I got to go help. I was, I was only 18 then. It was kind of, I took it as, damn, my father could have died in that. So that's the way I looked at it. I don't know if you remember this from when I was a kid, but since I was little, I used to think that was Channel 11 when we would drive
I
by the
do
World Trade Center.
remember.
And
Remember.
that actually sparked my jersey number for, every sport that I play. I'm number 11. And that was before
Wow.
9/11 happened. Mark Messier also played a big part of that by winning the championship for the Rangers in '94. But
Okay.
those are the two things that gave me my jersey numbers. And to see all that happen, and it was, I was just part of the mob, I guess. I was willing to go to war with everything we had, and willing to not come back for it. And very shortly after my during my first deployment, I really learned a lot about what had been going on prior to 9/11, which is something that a lot of people are under the misconception that, yeah, we went to Iraq back in Desert Storm, and then we left Iraq, and then we went back in 2003, and we went back to war. And it's like, well, yes, but no. Yeah, we were there for Desert Storm, but we never left. There's been active military bases over there since those days. So our presence over there and our our far reach, I guess, as I should say, our far political reaches as a nation have been felt over there since before those times, and it's being translated, with some of the locals from Qatar where we were stationed, to get their viewpoint on it was eye-opening, because they're a neutral country. They don't have a preference in the war. They are part of the Allies, which is why the U.S. has so many bases in Qatar. But they're a rich, they're a pretty rich nation. Not the guys that we were dealing with. We were dealing with the average locals who were unemployed at the time, and then a base comes to their area and they're offered free work, or not free work, but they're offered work. So they take it. They're janitors, and some of them are busboys on the base. They serve many purposes there on the active Air Force bases, and just the active military bases, period. But to hear some of their takes on what was going on, it was very eye-opening. It was to see the neutrality, which is, basically they don't really care which way it turns out because it doesn't affect them except for the fact that they're working on the Air Force base.
Wow.
They were really nonchalant with the fact that we were there to do our job and to go to war, and they really didn't see it the way we saw it. They saw it as, well, you guys were attacked. Why wouldn't you be attacked? We don't know who had anything to do with it, but why wouldn't you guys be attacked? The U.S. has been strongholding countries all over the world for many years. This is the result of what happens when you meddle in other countries' politics. And it was like, wow, okay, so maybe maybe we didn't know everything, and so that led me into a different change into the way I saw things. I deployed another time after that on my own fruition. And that was because, for a couple of reasons. One of the reasons, the main reason, was that they gave us tax-free pay in the desert. So it was like making extra money. The other reason was, I had a lot of young guys that were that I was bringing up in the Air Force through the workforce of what we did as crew chiefs on aircrafts, and I felt a sense of supervisory responsibility there, I guess. It was a lot of their first times. A lot of them were very new and green to the experience. And the second time I went over in somewhat of a leadership role, and it was, so I guess in that sense, it was great, in the sense that the responsibility, the knowledge that I learned, the knowledge of my own capabilities was a really big positive from it. There were very few negatives. I got out under, under negative terms. I was, administratively discharged under honorable conditions. I had a friend in the Air Force. Well, he's still a friend of mine, but we were suite mates, which basically meant we shared a bathroom. And one thing happened to him, and a spotlight was put on him, and then that led to me. I had admitted to taking a Percocet without a prescription for some back pain that I was experiencing, and that led to an Article 15 for me, loss of my rank, and eventually the option to either get out early or continue as the lowest rank that I was. When I went in, I signed a 6-year contract. I did 4 years of that and got out because of that situation. And it was a disappointing situation for me, simply for the fact that it was like, this is what you guys are upset about,
Right.
and they were making it seem like, well, yeah, you took a Percocet. It's like, yeah, man, I wasn't sitting around, just looking for the loops and the lights to go off in my eyes. I had back pain. A big part of my job is lifting around a heavy toolbox that weighed over 50 pounds. A big part of our job is lifting heavy aircraft parts that we need to maintain the aircraft. And, it was just that zero tolerance thing. And that's something that you're taught from day one when you go into the Air Force. So it's not like it's not like I can say nobody warned us. But I felt the degree of what they were trying to do. They were trying to give me jail time even. And it was
Wow.
like, it's ridiculous. Why are we going through all this length when the only thing I the only thing I saw in my eyes was, listen, yeah, I took a pill that relieves muscle pain so that I could go to work the next day and just do my job. And you guys are turning it into a, well, you're a drug addict and this and that and the third. And it's like, how did we get there? And then on top of that, my friend got in trouble, among other things, but one of the main reasons was because I had said that he had given me a Percocet, which was prescribed to him. So, he had a wisdom tooth removed, and so that's why they had given him Percocets, and he was kind enough to give me one in a time of my pain. And because of that, he actually did do time, and I ended up getting out under these conditions, and I was stripped of the benefits that I should have had, even with serving only 4 years in the Air Force. A lot of people are not in tune to the fact that the GI Bill that all the military members are not entitled to, but they are offered, is actually paid from them. You pay a whole year. They take a certain amount of money out of your check every paycheck for a whole year for your first year in the Air Force, and they use that to pay for your college later. Now obviously some people go through extensive degrees and they use a lot more than they paid in, and that's great, and that's one of the benefits of it. But having paid in and not being able to use it was, it was a frustrating thing, especially because, my daughter is, she's 10, going to be 10 in March, and, I could have potentially passed that down to her, and that was one of my goals when I got when I had my daughter, was to try to get that transferred over to her, but there was a lot of push because of the way I exited the Air Force, and under the guidelines of my exit, that's one of the things, is that I don't get the benefits because of it. So I had a lot of bitterness coming out, but I gained a lot from it.
Sure.
Even in the negatives, I learned a lot, and just kept it moving. It was a great experience for the work that I did. We supported the war, even though I have mixed feelings now about the actual war, about the reasons for going to war. All of that aside, at the time we thought we were serving a purpose, and I got to know a lot of really great guys, and it was a great experience overall. You know,
It's
it's
kind of funny, Josh, but I see everything that we do in life, I think, happens for a reason.
sure.
So we may not know what the reasoning is, but there was a reason why it is you came out. I saw the podcast that you had with your mother, and
Hmm.
how, she was terrified when, 9/11 happened and you were called out. I could totally relate to her. I mean, that probably was pretty terrifying for her as a parent, and for your father, for any parent,
Yeah,
for all the young people that went out to that. Because at that time, you're right, the country was so gung ho. Here in
yeah.
Virginia, it's a military state. Military
Oh yeah,
people, every other person you see here is military.
sure.
Here in my job, every other person that sits around me is military. That's just the way it is out here. They're past military, so you could speak to them and they'll tell you, "Oh yeah, the Navy's better." Or then you speak to somebody who's from the Army. "Oh no, the Army's better." Or then you
Yeah,
have those Air Force men. "Oh no, well the Air Force men, we're on top of everybody." And then there's of course the Marines who say, they're the best because they do everything.
yeah,
So I know very well how all of that goes, but it all happens for a reason. So there was a reason why you came out. And like you say, you gained good experiences from it. You take your experiences and you just roll.
yeah,
That's all we can do in life. Just roll with it. And
yeah,
you've learned from it. You keep going, and you've grown. I'm very proud of you. Like I told you by text, you've accomplished a lot in your life, and you have a lot to be proud of, man.
yeah. And the best part is it's not over yet. We have another opportunity tomorrow and later on today to continue on that work. Um, there's there's definitely been a lot of change that's come with it, and a lot after it too. A big problem I had coming out of the Air Force was joining the civilian workforce again. and being put into a place where, you're just working a job. You're just trying to get paid, get your time, get your check, go home.
Yeah.
And it was astonishing to me to see how many people perform at the lowest level possible.
They just try to get by, man.
Yeah, you know what? And sometimes they don't even do that. And it's just kind of like, holy shit, like you're still allowed to have a job. Like there's a ton of unemployed people out there who would love a job, and they'll take yours in a heartbeat and do it 10 times better than you because you just don't give a shit. And then it was very interesting when I started working for the clinic that I just left. They were a non-for-profit that dealt with homeless healthcare. So things IT-wise were very fast, but the rest of the culture was not. Even though it was a medical environment in that sense, don't delay, but nobody was sprinting. It was a clinic, not an emergency room, so nobody was going to die if anything went too slow. Just things were going to back up and things were going to move slower. People were going to get angry, and that's pretty much all that happens. So to go into that workforce, it was like, it was interesting. I started off there just as the IT administrator. Everybody just kind of bypassed me. I was just the guy that fixed the computers. After about a year, the CMO that was there, who was hired a week after me, she resigned. And so a lot of the things that she had done proactively in the system that I was not learning because I didn't have to do them, my role was definitely amplified after she left. So it was a very beneficial thing for me. I was never, even though I was the IT up as administration there, and even though that was the case, I still performed as though I was. And so about a year after, after her leaving and me stepping up, about a year after that, I was then welcomed because there was a new CEO, and he really liked the way I did things. And he gave me a lot of leeway, a lot of space to perform other tasks above just my duties. And in a sense, he was a very liberal guy. He was, he had a male partner. He was from a hospital background before that, and so he really enjoyed the slowdown coming from a hospital live environment, going to a not-for-profit clinic. So he was able to focus on a lot of things, and just the way he built his relationship with me, he put me back into that mode of, okay, it was very military, not in the sense of, we have to be aggressive or anything like that. It was just, in the military, there was a term which is, go find work. If you're just standing around twiddling your thumbs, you're fucking up. So you got to go find something to do.
Right.
And in the civilian world, it's not like that. Everyone's just, they're watching the clock and they're like, all right, come on, 5 o'clock, come on, 5 o'clock. If they can delay on any more to do work, they will. And he took that aspect out of it.
If the phone rings and it's like 15 minutes to 5 o'clock, oh no, you're not picking up the phone.
Yep.
No.
He absolutely, and that was something that I didn't even see coming, is that I lulled myself into that comfort of being back into the civilian workforce. That my first year and a half there at the clinic, as much work as I got done, I still did a lot of procrastinating. And then when he came on board, it was kind of like, listen, man, we need to change these things and these things, and these things are not getting done. And none of his concerns had to do with my areas. So, the little bit of changes he had me do, always came quickly. And I was able to dive in deeper as a team member and really bring things up, And so that's what I mean by it put me back into that military mindset, which is, okay, yeah, I don't leave here until 5, but there's a lot of stuff that could be done. And if I start on even one of those, I'll be that much less into it later, And then even in projects, it just built me back into the coordinator program, which I had learned a lot in the military, which was, okay, everybody, this is what we have to do. There's a lot of project coordination, basically. This is what's going on. This is my role. And and then holding others accountable for their actions was another part of it that came with it. It's like, listen, this is what I expect from you. And it's not a thing uh, of of waving fingers. It's not a thing of flexing administrative muscle. It was just, listen, this is what we need to get done as a team, and this is the brunt that I'm taking to do it. This is what I'm asking you to do, because this is what falls. If at any point becomes unclear, or you don't see us completing, come back to me and we'll come back to this, and we'll restructure our plan around it. And when I took that aspect of it, it just things really opened up for me as far as being there. But when it came time to move, it was kind of like, my wife was like, well, would you rather stay here in Miami and continue working, and we'll travel back and forth as best we can? And it was like, no, absolutely not. I didn't see an end game at this place. The new CEO had just come in. He had promoted somebody else who was on the administration team to be the operations president there, and it was like, okay, this guy's not leaving, and this guy just got here. So, in order for me to move up out of my position, I need to take one of theirs.
Okay.
So when I thought about it that way, it was like, yeah, am I going to be career oriented like I've tried to be since I left the Air Force? No, it wasn't worth it. For me, it was more worth it to be here with my family. And, even though it's been really tough to find work here, it's like, all right, now it's opening up to new opportunities. Now not working gives me the leeway to spend the day yesterday in Bayamon, and I interviewed a bunch of lacrosse players. There was a tournament going on up there, and I really dug my toes in yesterday. It was kind of like, all right, listen, a big part of what we're trying to do here for lacrosse in Puerto Rico is trying to bring revenue to the island by having lots of tourists come. Not that it doesn't already, but if we can increase those by hundreds every couple of months, that's a huge benefit to the economy in this island, and in one sense, it's kind of got me thinking back to, the U.S. politicians' way of dealing with it, the U.S. Federal Reserve, which is the more money they have from taxes, the more they misspend it. And that's like way back here in the back of my mind, but I try not to focus on that because the money is not what I'm after. I don't care what they do with the money, as long as they let us play. As long as they say, yes, it's okay for us to represent Puerto Rico internationally and go travel internationally. Not that I'm, trying to be Captain Puerto Rico over here, but it's a sport that I became very passionate about, and I enjoy, and I definitely enjoyed coaching and bringing it to others. It's a sport that's in its origins very tribal, and I very much have understood, at least here in Puerto Rico, it's a very tribal culture here. Not so much anymore because of the way things have changed in times, but you can still feel the culture back into the older days. Especially there's a lot of older people here, and you kind of see it disappearing a little bit with the youth. I'm sure you understand very well. Parts of our culture is lost every generation if we don't keep up on it, and Puerto Rico's been through so many changes over the last 100 years that, the youth of today is very, I don't know what it was like back then, but from what I'm understanding, it's very different. They're trying to be very Americanized, and, this, that, and the third, none of which would hinder us from completing our goal. They've taken to lacrosse, I'm sorry, not to lacrosse, but they've taken to soccer and basketball here. Both of these sports very much have a deep correlation with the athletics that are involved in lacrosse and the mindset that's involved in being successful in lacrosse. So it's been slow pushing so far, but it's building momentum. And we have some free clinics coming up in April that I'm looking forward to. My partners are coming down, and so we can host some free clinics for lacrosse in Puerto Rico. Just host it on the beach, a handful of kids, maybe 10 to 20, and just letting them have fun. Here's the stick, here's how you use it, and that experience in and of itself leaves you wanting more.
Definitely, and it's that it's something that you love, it's something you have a passion for, And you know
Yeah.
what? With all just listening to you talk about it, I know you're gonna excel, man. Because when you love something and you want to do it, you're gonna do well at it. I'm sure.
Yeah. I hope so. So we had that big push yesterday, and it's one step at a time, but the steps got to keep coming. The steps got to keep coming.
Definitely.
So it's
Soccer's always been really big, right? Like in all Caribbean nations, in Latin America, soccer, and Europe, soccer
I
is a very large sport.
I was under the big misconception that here in Puerto Rico they didn't play soccer, and I was always under the impression that none of the Caribbean islands played. All the South American countries play. Mexico plays. There's a couple of islands like the Belize, they have a team. But I was under the impression that no, they didn't play here. And when I got here, that egg was busted right away because it was like, man, they have brand new soccer fields everywhere.
Yeah,
And then
yeah,
what they did in some places was they incorporated the soccer field as part of there because baseball has always been in the tradition here. So they're just incorporating it in other aspects that they didn't before. I don't know how long they've been playing here. It seems like something that's still very raw. It's not something I don't think they've been doing for a long time. I could be wrong on that, but it's not as big as I've seen it in other places. But the fact that they have it here, the fact that they've adopted to it, however long that's been, that leaves them open to change. And that opening is all we need. That thirst for a new thing to do, for a new goal to accomplish, for a new entertainment factor to come in. All of these things can be beneficial, especially if our goal is to bring this here. Our secondary goal is to make sure that the island benefits, so that way they see it as a good thing. They in my past as a coach, one of our biggest pushing tools was listen, especially living in Miami. If you play lacrosse and you succeed in lacrosse and your grades are good, your chances of getting into a good Ivy League college increase dramatically. There are now some universities in Florida even that are offering lacrosse, which has not always been the case. I mean, 10 years ago, that wasn't the case. There was maybe 2 to 3 tops. And now we're up to, I think, 12 to 16 colleges in Florida that are all offering lacrosse as either club or Division 3 or 2 teams. So that was always our push for the youth was, listen, get your grades up, by any means necessary in that aspect, and learn this sport. And if you play another sport, that's fine. Stay playing that sport, but play this sport also. This sport, I guarantee you, will give you aspects of that sport that will strengthen. And we saw that repeatedly. It didn't matter what sport they were playing. Even the martial artist always said, my endurance is just better now because of this sport. There's a lot of running involved. There's a lot of cerebral processing that goes on, and there's a lot of communication, all of which are essential values within life and work, and furthering your education even, being in college, you need all of those things. Being successful in a workforce, you need all of those things. You need to be able to think on the go. You need to be able to communicate with your coworkers to accomplish goals. And, to dedicate yourself to something, to be good at anything that's required. You need to dedicate yourself. And, it's just a pleasurable experience. I remember being 8 years old or 7 years old, whatever it was, when Artie would come out from Long Island. And, he was older than me, but he played lacrosse, and he would bring his extra stick and let me play with him. And that little learning experience leaves you wanting more. If there's something about doing it that brings back ancient memories that we weren't alive to experience. And it was something that I had a conversation with my father about that being here in Puerto Rico when I first went to El Yunque. And my wife was showing me the towers that are there that were used in those days to defend the island. And it was like, as we were walking up this mountain, I kept having these these flashes of entire armies marching up the hill, like trying to take this tower so they could claim it as there, and it was just things that you definitely weren't there for them, but maybe you were in another life. Who knows? It's
Wow.
possibilities are endless, but it's it's something that connects you when you start playing it, and I think that connection is only a positive. So to bring it here is a good thing.
Does your daughter like to play it?
She was playing for a little while when she was younger in Miami. She did a summer with me completely, and at the end of the summer, somebody threw a ball at her and hit her in the forehead, and she kind of just do this anymore. And it was like, you know what? You don't have to. I'm not going to force you. So
Like, wait a minute, I got hit in
she,
the face.
she was like, hey, what the hell? I don't want to do this. I don't like getting hurt. She's that's the funny thing about her. She's always been very cautious. Ever since she was a baby,
Okay,
there's some kids that they start to learn how to walk, and before they're good at it, they start running down the hallway.
right.
My daughter almost never ran. She was she was the most cautious kid ever. Like she'd walk, and because she knew she would fall sometimes and walk right by the wall, she wouldn't touch it until she thought she was going to fall. She was right there, like, all right, just in case I need you. Oh, she would catch herself, and
Hey, that's
she's
good.
just always been really funny. Her self-preservation is off the charts. It's unmatched anywhere. She's gonna live forever as if she takes care of herself the way she always does. So yeah, I mean, she'll play with me now every now and then. We have some stick time together. I don't expect her to compete or anything, but it's a good father-daughter time when we have it. And another thing we do is we play chess together. So we've got a lot of different avenues of connection that I try to exploit, with her. So
Okay.
I just don't think there can be enough. And that was a big part of my experience. There was never enough options. For me, it was a little different because my parents being separated and them having different relationships after each other. I got to experience them in different relationships, and I always had another figure, or in some sense, either coming or going. So I got a lot of education from a lot of different people, and that's where just the different avenues was very apparent. So I had my daughter, it was like, the biggest thing for her is I want her to have options. If I do nothing else as a parent, I want my daughter to be capable of taking care of herself and to have options. And so far, she's doing great. She's really good at school, very smart. She learns very easily. She didn't get the trait that I had, which was she's not lazy like I was in school. She gets all her stuff done. She accomplishes what she needs to, so that we don't have to give her grief. And she's there's not enough good things I can say about my daughter, really. I mean, we became the luckiest parents ever when we had her.
It's great.
The signs were
Wonderful.
the signs were immediate. She would sleep all the way through the night. In her first week of being alive, she slept through the night always. She's always been a heavy sleeper. So she's just a great kid. Not enough great things about her. I mean, there's too many great things about her, but she's amazing. But yeah, you have
When you
your
were
own
young,
experience.
when you were that age, because you say she's 8 years old now?
She's 9. She's about to be 10.
No. When you were younger, I remember you didn't like to read. And I remember I
No.
would always push every summer when you would come to us. I mean, I would have like books everywhere. And your grandmother and your grandfather would always go out and buy those Goosebumps books. Remember the
Yeah, I
Goosebumps
remember those.
books?
Yep.
Like, oh no, Jeff likes these. We got to buy a lot of these books. Let's buy them because maybe he'll read them. Let's
Yeah,
hope.
yeah.
We would
And I
pray
actually did get into
sometimes.
those. I got into those heavy because a lot of them were scary stories, and I was into that stuff back then. It was like, oh man, they got me something I like.
Yes.
Before then, it was just,
Yes.
and that's the hardest part, is finding joy reading. So that way, it's not something they don't want to do.
Right. Yeah, that's important. That's primal.
Well, yeah. Once I found that with my daughter, it was like, oh man, this is going to be easy. In school, I'm sure it's the same in Virginia, that they have to read for a certain amount of time every night. So at first, when I would sit her down to have her do it on her own, and I would be doing something else, you could see her eyes wandering, and she's not really reading. And I remember those experiences, like, damn, I remember doing that too. Like she doesn't want to read that. And I so then I would also try sitting with her and reading my own thing while she was reading. And I made sure that at the time, she was too young to see that I was reading a book on my phone, and I have a lot of books on my phone and my tablets and stuff like that. But I would make a point to read a physical book in front of her, so that she could see, at 4 or 5 years old, okay, he's reading a book too. Maybe I should read. So then, um, I tried to make her like it, and luckily she did. She's reading the fourth Harry Potter right now, and
Wow.
she's reading it on her tab. She likes it. She's been a digital reader now for a little while. She still reads regular books, but the Harry Potter series we have digitally, so that's how she's enjoying it. And she's hilarious. We go on these long road trips, and she gets bored. So whereas I used to bring a Game Boy, she'll bring her tablet, and instead of playing games, she'll read a book. And it's like, you're hilarious. You're amazing. And she's great. She really is. She came with me yesterday, and we shot a lot of videos together. And then we went to El Moro, and we visited El Moro together because she had a school field trip back when we first moved here, and she didn't want to go. I think it was the first one they were doing as a school, and she, for whatever reason, chose not to go. She even chose not to tell us about it because we would have made her go. I thought that would have been a great experience for her, but she chose not to experience it. And instead, me and her went yesterday for the first time inside. We've been to the outside several times, but we went inside yesterday, and she got to learn a lot about what was happening. And she was cracking me up because she had her phone, so she would take a selfie, and she just cracks me up. One of the things we saw yesterday, and we've seen it. This is the second time I've seen it on the island, and I still haven't done it, but I'm gonna Google the Salazar connection with Puerto Rico, because there's a cave of Indians. It's called La Cueva de los Indios in Arecibo, in the northwest part of the island, and it's a cave inside of the rock that I just guess would used to be the sea wall, And in this cave, our last name is written in the concrete, in the rock, from 1942. It's been there.
Really? So you think you
Yeah,
had
it just says
some?
Salazar in 1942. And I
Wow.
was like, holy shit. So when I mentioned it to my father, he was like, yeah, did you see that? I'm like, have you seen that? And he's like, I don't remember his response, but I think he told me no. And then yesterday we were at El Moro, like I said, for the first time on the inside, and inside one of the cells, they have the prison cells inside of the castle. Inside one of the prison cells, there's Salazar carved into the concrete also. This one didn't have a year on it, but it was like, whoa, what the hell? Even in town here, where I live in Ponce, there's an area of Ponce called Salazar, my last name. So it was like, there's something going on, but I haven't yet taken the time to figure that out. But yeah, I can't wait to do that. There's definitely a connection. I just haven't seen where it comes from. So it's that's going to be really cool to find out and share with her also. But yeah. So what is it that you're doing now professionally?
Professionally, I'm a cost estimator. I work in a pump manufacturer. We actually make pumps for all different types of applications in the general industry, in the chemical markets, in the oil and gas market, and in the industrial business. That's where we
Okay.
are heavily. It's a global company, and I deal with all our customers globally. So I'm the one that I come in early because I deal with all our customers in Saudi Arabia, in India, in France. I deal and I have relationships with all those business units out there.
Oh, that's excellent. That's
Yeah.
excellent.
We actually have a visitor here from Saudi Arabia.
Oh
He's
yeah.
here. He was for 2 weeks. Yeah, I'm gonna have lunch with him tomorrow.
Awesome.
He's actually from India because he was, we've always talked, and I always knew that in Saudi Arabia there's a lot of people, Koreans there and Indian,
Right.
who actually go there to work. That's the majority of the workforce there because real Saudi Arabians do not work.
Oh, I didn't
That's
know
how
that.
he's always explained to me. They don't have to. It's they're basically family from sheiks. So they basically, have a different set of laws, different rules, and they bring these expatriates to come work there.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so
Wow.
I love my job. I deal with a lot of really interesting people. We sell when the whole Katrina, my company sent out pumps to pump out all the water
Okay.
from Louisiana to bring it all out. We do a lot of important things. Any type of aquarium that you go to has our pumps.
Right. Well, that's awesome. Yeah, I actually, in the aircraft we worked on, there was no shortage of pumps there, from oils to hydraulics, all kinds of stuff. So yeah, I mean, that goes into any kind of machinery, any kind of production equipment that is necessary. I mean, that's a lot of work. I'm sure. I'm sure. But that's really cool though, that you get to deal with internationally with people. That in itself brings a lot of perception shifts. That you get to see
Definitely.
how other people live, how other culture lives, and that was probably one of my best experiences from being in the how other countries lived. How they didn't focus on the same things we're taught to focus on here, well, at least in the United States. And you can see the different values that are instilled in those people that are sometimes, and I won't say all the time, but they are sometimes missed here in the U.S. It, they take a lot of priority into things that we consider second, second or third, and it was a very nice thing to see. It's just a great experience to get to know what other people in the world live like, and see how they view things. Because sometimes we put focus on things that just don't matter. and
Most
you
times
know,
we do. Most times we do, unfortunately. I think Americans, we tend to be very selfish and just think
yeah,
about ourselves.
yep.
And that's not the world that we're living in now.
No, not at all. Not at all. So I mean, that's I guess one of the focuses of my podcast here is just to, it's starting off with people that I know, that I'm familiar with, that I grew up with, family members mostly, and then I'm mixing in people that I've met on the internet. I had a couple from Australia on my second podcast. That was a lot of fun. I met them a couple of years ago from Google Plus, and that was my second time, really getting uh, educated on other cultures. The first time was the military, and then I got out of the military and moved back to Miami, and the cultures there are so limited. There's only so many. But when you start breaching out to everywhere you can't physically be, you start to learn things that really change the way you look at them. Very positive.
Do you consider
So.
yourself a New Yorker or do you consider yourself a Floridian?
No, I've never considered myself a Floridian for the fact that I don't typically like the people I run into there. Ever since I was there in high school, it was just not a pleasure for me to. I guess the best way to put it is all my friends from Miami I no longer have, really. It's
Really? Okay.
far and few in between. Played hockey with that. I have one of them who's still a friend. One of them, another buddy of mine who I met through him. But as far as like the guys I went to high school with and stuff like that, I really don't see them much. It was a big wake up call when I came back from the Air Force. It's like, yeah, life moves on without you, man. Nobody here cared that you were gone. Not that they didn't care. It's just it shouldn't stop anything for anyone. And that's since then I've had a corrected perception on that, and it's like, it shouldn't have mattered to them. You know what I mean? It should only have mattered that, hey, look, you're back, you're safe. All right, great, glad you're back. I mean, these were high school friends that, they're friends of the season. Everyone comes into your life for either a purpose or a stretch of time. And there's always those two. And so that was the biggest wake up of, one stays with you forever and the others, they kind of straggle off. So that was yeah, that was a big one. So yeah, I've always considered myself a New Yorker. I'll always tell people, I was born there, and that's where I feel like I came of age. I was raised all over really, but I always felt like that was my home base. My grandmother's house in Queens was home base. Um, I didn't have anything else at the time in my youth that was. We on my other side of the family, we moved around a lot. We ended up in California, we ended up in Texas, we ended up in Miami, and it was a constantly shifting what we called home, and the only constant of my home was Queens up until the house was sold a couple of years ago.
Right.
That was
Right.
where I constantly that was I always call it home base because it's like playing tag. It's like there's home base, and that's always where I went back to.
Sure.
So that was
Sure.
for me. That's how I like to put it. I was born and came of age there. Um, the experiences I had there were always um, extremely positive for me. I've joked with my father a lot that some people can't take being there, and I love New York. I've never had any problems being there. And
There's
and
no
a
other
lot,
city
a
like
lot of
New
people
York.
say no, and there maybe never will be. There's a lot of great cities out there. New York used to be my favorite right up until we came to Puerto Rico, and now it's kind of like, now it's kind of get tough to get me back over there. I like it here.
Oh, whoa, Puerto Rico's nice, huh?
Yeah, yeah, I really do. I like it here. I don't miss the snow at
Never been.
all. I mean,
I
I
would
haven't
love
missed the
to
snow
go.
for a
I've
while.
never been.
Really? Oh yeah, yeah. If you and your husband ever come down with the kids, yes, please let me know. Up with you guys. It's an amazing
Sure.
experience here.
Okay.
Everybody's been very curious as to the transition. Everybody's like, man, is things more expensive there? Not really. We're paying $100 less for a three-bedroom townhouse with two floors, a backyard, gated community, whereas we were paying $100 more in Miami for a two-bedroom, one-bathroom apartment,
Wow.
and
Wow.
no security in the complex or anything like that. The location was very centralized, so we were there for about 8 years, and we made the most of it. We had a good place right on the canal, so our canoe got used a lot, and it was great living there. But things here just and I don't know if I mean obviously it's a big part of the fact that I'm not currently working. So yeah,
Mhm.
for me it's pretty easy because I'm pretty much home cleaning, and then I take care of my family after that. So it's not like I've had to endure any kind of harsh change aside from the fact that like I just said, I'm not working. That's the biggest change that I've endured here. So I guess maybe that's why I like it so much. But my wife also seems to enjoy it. When I asked her what her favorite or what her positive change was, her first response was, "Well, here it's so much easier to unplug from work,
Mm.
even though we live closer to work than we did before. Before we were only 3 miles from work. I think now we're only maybe a mile and a half from her job. But she always said, in the 15 minutes it used to take us to get home, I couldn't unwind until maybe 2 hours after being home. Whereas now she leaves work, and before we even make it here, she's already forgotten her problems for the day. And for
Yes.
that makes a big difference for both of us. I mean, that I'm sure you can understand that's the
Mhm.
stress from work sometimes, unfortunately, throws itself into your home. If you allow it to, and unfortunately, both of us used to allow it to, and now it it's not like that anymore. That friction that work used to cause doesn't come up.
I think
It's
most people do. It's kind of hard to separate stress you have at work when you get home, and that's something. I guess that's it's a perceptive change. You really you have to change the person you are once you leave your work, and like you say, you're driving home. It's a difference,
right.
and a lot of people can't separate that.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure a big part of it also is that she's able now to really vent to me about work. Um, Back when I was working, from the time I left my house in the morning, I was already working on my phone. because I would take the train in or the metro rail in to downtown Miami, and that's where the clinic was. So I mean, I was remotely connected to my computer at work from my phone, constantly doing work back and forth on the train. You know, I really felt that as an IT person, you really get a lot of questions that sometimes should be very self-explanatory, but sometimes as a professional, you forget not everybody went to school for and understands what I do for work. You know, what I know shouldn't be what you know because we do two different things. And you know, my very poor characteristic of it was, you know, I didn't want to hear questions after leaving work because I got so many stupid questions at work that was like, you know what, I just don't want to hear anything. I don't want to have to answer anything. You know, I don't like talking on the phone much. I'm more of a message person, and work definitely amplified that. You know, it was like, no, I don't want to answer my phone. I, the ringer starts going off, I even turn off the ringer. Stop ringing. I don't want to answer it. Because from the time I got up, or, you know, from the time I got on my way to work, it was nonstop. You know, oh, Sal, this is happening with the software. Sal, this is happening with this. And Sal, we need these reports. Sal, we know this is not IT related, but we need you to assist with this patient group. You know, Sal, this, that, Sal, this. And, you know, being the one IT person for a clinic of many, many people, it was a lot of balls to juggle at first. And the biggest challenge there was that I had not worked in the medical profession before. I was coming up in my IT career. I had worked for a consultant who did all kinds of jobs in the IT field, from setting up security cameras to taking care of business owners' computers. I was with him for a couple months. From there, I went to work for a school that taught medical degrees. So they would teach ultrasound classes. They were teaching a nursing field, medical coders, all kinds of radiology equipment engineers, or not engineers, but, you know, equipment techs like that in the medical field. They taught all of those programs. So my experience with the medical field was, okay, Sal, we have a class starting on this date. We need you to take all these computers and install that medical software that we use to help them train, and that's it. So up until the point where I worked at the clinic, my only experience was, okay, I installed the software, made sure it was working. Bye. You guys use the software for your 6-week class, and then I'll come back at the end of the 6 weeks and I'll wipe all these computers clean and reinstall it. That was really my only experience. But as far as IT work, I was running the college after about a year of working there. My IT director was very good about letting me have ownership of my position, and he really trusted me to get my work done, and that was a big part of me learning everything that I did. And after that, I worked for Lennar, which was the developer company, and my job there was to work with all of the third-party designers, architects, and engineers that input blueprints, make changes to blueprints, and follow blueprints to build the homes that they build. So from the time I got in, and I would get in an hour early because I was the one person at my position, and this company deals all the way across the U.S. So when I came in early, I was dealing with people on the East Coast, and then I would stay a little late to deal with the people on the West Coast. And I was leading webinars, teaching presidents and vice presidents of divisions how to do simple things on the software. And then at the same time, I would also troubleshoot. So if they had a problem, Sal, you know, I can't do this with this certain file. Okay, let's troubleshoot. I would get in, fix their problem, and then let them work. But there was so much work to do that that position really should have been at least a team of 5. And you know, in one 8-hour to 9-hour day, there's not enough time to host that many meetings and to fix that many problems. You know, it's an ungodly amount of work. And my supervisor, the head of the division that I worked for, she was not IT oriented. You know, she was a CPA. She was an accountant before being put in charge of 3 different IT departments, all related to software regarding, you know, building and finance of these projects. So it's like, I don't understand who put you in charge of us, but whoever it is doesn't know their management, and that's another common problem that I see in the workforce is that the people higher up have no idea what's happening down below.
Definitely
And
not.
and not that they need to be able to do all the tasks, but they need to at least understand what needs to happen.
Right.
I don't expect them to get in there and dive in with their hands, but I expect them to at least know, okay, listen, if I don't know exactly what's going on over there, I need this person to know exactly what's going on over there because this person does report to me. And there's been, several positions that I've held that just unqualified management, terrible leaders. Um, some people say, oh, well, that's because you don't like to take direction. No, I don't mind direction at all. I may not have liked it in my youth, but once I got into the Air Force, I understood the purpose of direction. When it's done well with good leadership, all your expectations are laid out in front of you. You're not given a set of steps to follow. You're given a goal, and you, because you're a professional, understand the things you need to do to accomplish that goal. So it's, when you know how to do your leadership, the people below you, your subordinates, follow accordingly. And I just don't feel like these people were leaders in that sense. It was a very much, I expect you to teach me everything you know, because at some point I'm going to be asked and I need to know. But then I would explain and they wouldn't understand. And so I would explain simpler and they still couldn't understand. And then I would explain even simpler than that before even having knowledge of computers, and it was like, I don't understand why you're having so much problem with this, like you've been here how long? How many people in my position have you supervised that you still don't understand what's happening?
And that's where the
It's like,
frustration grows.
yeah. And so, then it's like, oh, well, you don't like taking direction from a woman. It's like, how do you get there from that? I just don't like your direction. You don't give me direction. You ask me to do everything, and then you ask me to inform you, but you're not willing to learn the information. And it's something I ended up overcoming afterwards. Once I left Lennar, I went to the clinic, and once again, I'm the IT administrator. No one else in the building does what I do. I am the only one in the clinic that does what I do. So it took ownership again to do, to be successful. So all of them good experiences. I learned from every one of them, even the negative ones. So I still consider those positive. And it's been a lot of fun. Some heavy waves in between, but it's been a fun ride, and I look forward to continuing with it. And hopefully this lacrosse thing will kick off, and that'll be my main focus here once everything else is set aside. The podcast. My distance from my immediate family has made me very aware that I was very disconnected from a lot of people, not just my immediate family. There's a lot of relationships that I have in the world that I was not giving them the proper respect, and I think by reaching out in this way to the podcast and reaching out to people from my past, I think it's very beneficial. We get to, there's people who know me who don't know you, and because of this podcast, they can understand a little bit more from, both aspects. You being a stepmother at that time, me being a stepchild, coming from those circumstances. Hopefully we've educated some people on diabetes today, so it's all
Yeah.
just trying to get information out there, and from the wider range of people that I grew up with, I've learned so many different things. I'm not a master of anything, but I've become efficient in many things.
You've had many
And
experiences to teach you these things.
yeah, many different, and in
And
all
it's just slowly grow.
aspects. Yeah. So it's been good. it's been good,
And I
and
learned
hopefully
a lot
through
from
these.
you also.
I'm sorry.
I learned a lot from you as well.
Cool. So hopefully these will continue to ripple out, and luckily because of the internet, they'll be available to um, to little ones who are not able to understand this now. They'll be able to understand it when they become to that age, and they're able to see these videos, and it's like, okay, and like I was, this is leaving the imprint from my daughter of who her father is when I'm not being her father. You know, I'm sure maybe you didn't feel that way, but your parents, because they're your authority, um, sometimes they seem a little unhuman. Not in a negative way. They're your parents. You don't see the full aspect of them as a human being. You only see them as the person caring for you. And sometimes being a parent, caring for someone, frustration takes part in that. Sometimes something didn't go the way it should have. Sometimes a mistake was made, and sometimes a blatant mistake was made. So, not everything is is um, is rainbows when you're a kid with your parents. So, I think my daughter's coming into that age where she understands that um, when I speak to her, it's not an attack. It's simply that I'm an aggressive speaking person, speaking at her, and I'm trying to get a point across that's very, very important to me. And when you see your parent, when you get older, you see the side of your parents that you weren't able to see because now you're an adult. You understand life a little better, and it gives you an insight as to what some of the friction between you was at that time. So my hopes is that she can see this and we can speed that process up a little bit. We can, I'd like to, I'd like to feel like she understands why I am the way I am, and I think this podcast is a good head start into that direction. Um, will I be successful? Who knows? But if nothing else, she'll learn some things. Um, and she already educates herself a lot on YouTube, so it's not too far of a reach for her. So,
That's great. Yeah, you're right. Our perceptions and our relationships with our parents change. It's completely different when we're young, and as you
right.
get older, it changes from the parent having to be the disciplinarian
Hmm.
to being a friend, being somebody that you could actually talk to. Because if anything, family is the only one, like you're saying, is constant.
Yeah.
Your friends come and go. Family is typically there,
Right.
at least for most family, hopefully,
Yeah.
family is always there and they're always constant. They're always there.
Yeah. I mean,
And they're the ones that
I'd
see
like to
you
think that
change.
that's always true. I'm sorry.
They're the ones that see you change.
Yeah.
They see you from being a child to being a teenager to being an adult. And,
Right.
perceptions change for the child and for the parents.
Right. Absolutely. Yep. Well, this was a lot of fun catching up with you,
It was.
and I hope we get to do this again. And I really hope that you and your family visit Puerto Rico because we would have a great time here. The next time I'm in the States, if I'm in your area, I will let you know ahead of time. But typically I'm either headed towards Miami or New York when I hit the States. But yeah, it's a lot of fun. We're looking forward to visitors here. I heard my father's coming in April, so that's going to be a lot of fun.
That's great. Yeah.
Yeah. So as for now, I will say we'll touch base again soon, and um, if there's anything that you feel like needs to be public, please let me know, and we'll get it out here, and we'll host another one of these and get spread some messages. So thanks for joining me today, and it's been great catching up with you. And
Thank you for having me. It's been great.
absolutely. And I hope you enjoy the rest of the podcasts.
I definitely will. I've been watching all of them and I will continue to watch them.
Cool. My best to your family. I know you celebrated your son's 7th birthday this last weekend, and I hope you guys had a great time. And
Yes.
my best to you in your future. For everything that involves, and you know, please say hi to everybody for me. I haven't seen your brother or your sister or my cousin Louis for that matter in many years, and that's just a time lapse that continues so far. But next time I get to New York, I'm going to try to see if I can catch up with them and touch base with them.
All right.
But all righty, take care. I will see you again.
You too.
All right.
All right.
All right, everybody. This has been our Perception Therapy podcast for today, March 3rd of 2016. We hope you guys learned something. Once again, if you're unhappy with your situation, either change what you're doing or change the way you feel about it. You'd be surprised how that can be your first step into really making a positive change. So until then, until next time, be well and take care of each other.